playing time.
There's something to be said about being a good teammate, right?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. What kids don't realize, and they do later on when they get to be 25, 30, 35, 40, is that they're usually always going to be part of some team. And I think the most important team they're going to be part of is their family. We talk a lot with our guys is that we want to know what kind of husbands you're going to be, is that you're going to be a partner with somebody more than likely later on, and you need to be able to work together. You need to be able to communicate. You need to be able to give a little bit sometimes. Sometimes you got to lead. Sometimes you got to follow. And then you're going to be a parent hopefully someday. And how are you going to deal with those situations? And being on a team mirrors that, because you have to kind of fit into your role. And then the easiest one that some of them kind of get now is eventually you're going to be in a job. And you're going to have to follow directions from the boss. You're going to have to work hard. You're going to have coworkers that you might not get along with, but yet you're going to have a common vision to try to get something done. And so all of those things can be learned and taught on an athletic field, and they should be able to use those in their everyday life.
Do you find this to be true too? That again, I don't mean to pick on parents, but sometimes I think the athletes themselves, they kind of know where they stand individually. They kind of know the pecking order or just what's been going on in practice or games, and this is maybe why I'm not in there that much. And I'm not sure what that message is going home, and then you have mom and dad kind of sitting there going, how come she's not in there?
Yep, there's definitely a lot of that. I think kids usually kind of have a very good understanding of where they're at. And for us, we put things in place so that they know where they're at. We have meetings with kids after every single practice. We meet with 2 kids after every single basketball practice to say, this is where you're at, and this is where we see you. And what we try to tell our kids, and I would highly advise this to anyone in any profession, but also specifically in coaching, is just be very honest with where the child is. One of the stories that I tell is that I was lied to when I was playing football. I was playing football and they said, we'll get you in there next week for sure on the first team. We'll get you about 5-7 snaps. I said, okay, that's great. Never happened. Next week, same thing. We'll get you in there. And I said, I told myself, if I was ever a coach, I'm just not going to lie to them. I will say, I can't guarantee you. Here's a situation where you might get in, but you have to play this person in front of you, all that stuff. So what we try to do is we try to be very, very honest with them, but also tell them that you don't have to agree with it. Just because we tell you, right now you're kind of the 10th man and we're playing 8, and here's why, you don't have to agree with that. You don't have to be excited that we're not playing you. You don't have to go home and say, yes, Coach Dusha told me I'm not playing anymore. That's good. No, but what you need to do is be aware that there's a reason for what we do. There's a lot of thought and time and effort spent into where we place people and why we place them where we place them. And most of the time the kids understand that. As far as the parents are concerned, I think sometimes kids, they don't talk to their parents a lot, and I think if I look back to myself, I wasn't going home and talking to my parents about, this is where I'm at. And, sometimes you just, hi, goodbye, can I have $5, kind of thing. And so there's not some of that communication piece. And so at our parent meeting, we try to make it very clear to our parents that your son will know where he sits. If you want to know, you can ask him. You don't have to agree with it. But just know we put a lot of, and this is for any coach, they put a lot of thought, time, and effort into deciding who gets to play and why they get to play. It's not just arbitrarily, we're just going to throw these guys out there just to see if they succeed. There's a reason behind those things.
Can I get your feeling, too, on a subject of how much is too much? I hear this a lot with different athletes in all the sports, from the volleyball. They could play volleyball every weekend if they could, and that's what they would want to do. But then you got basketball, you've got your swimming, you've got in the summer with AAU basketball and all that kind of stuff. What is your feeling on how much is too much, and does a kid feel like they have to get out there and they're almost being made to get out there?
Yeah, I do think the system that we have right now, I would go on record to say it's too much. I think our summer period of June 1st to July 31st, they did put a week in of a no contact period, which I think is good. I think at a school of our size, the athletes are really pulled in a lot of different directions. Now, if you go down to Hopkins and Minnetonka and De La Salle, most of those kids are playing one sport. So if they're playing if they're a volleyball player, that's usually what they do. So why wouldn't they play JO volleyball all of the time? Why wouldn't they play AAU basketball in the spring and the summer and the fall? Because that's all that they do. Out here, we encourage 2 and 3 sport athletes, and if you're a 2 and 3 sport athlete, we want you to, of course, the coaches want you to do those things, but then we also want you to lift. We want you to work out. Most of the times they got to have a job. We have a lot of kids who work on the farm, and so now they've got all of the things they have to do for farming. Then we want them to work out and then do all these other things. And then most importantly, we want them to be a kid. We want them to go to the lake. We want them to go camping. We want them to go on vacations. We want them to sit around and watch movies. I do think it's too much. What I always try to do, and I hope other coaches do this, is number one, I want to work together with the other coaches at the school. I think we're very fortunate here in Melrose that basketball is kind of a priority for our kids. They love it. They want to be in the gym. But I'm also pretty mindful of, just because a lot of people love basketball here, if I did too much, it would probably take away from the other sports, and I don't think that is fair. I think that would be very selfish of me to say, well, all these kids, they love being in the gym, so we're going to go 3-4 days a week and 5-6 weekend tournaments, and they'll show up and it'll be great. Well, that's probably at the expense of some of the other sports. I think you got to work with the other sports. And on the other hand, I think you also, if kids want to do it, and are interested, and I think there should be opportunities for that, because sometimes people have a negative aspect about too much. Well, sometimes the kids like that. So it really is a difficult balance between what type of kids do you have, that how much are they interested in doing without taking it away from everything else. But I do think our current system in the summer it's too much. I would much rather see a 1 or 2 week period where you can work with the kids, and if they want to do other things outside of that, they can do that.
And I think my feeling is too that saying I have to do this, there's two definitions. I don't think the coach is telling you better go play this or you're not going to be playing this coming season. I think a kid looks at it and says, I have to go out and shoot some free throws and get better at this, because if I'm going to play, I've got to shoot better, or I've got to go play catch, and I have to throw the baseball better, whatever it is. Don't you see that too?
Yes, absolutely. I think sometimes kids, since there are so many opportunities, they're still usually passionate about the sport. So they realize, well, if I want to be good in the fall or the winter or the spring in my sport, if everyone else is kind of doing it, I should maybe do it, or else I might be left behind. And I think sometimes as teams and as towns you do that. Said, well, Melrose basketball, we better do some stuff in the summer because this school is doing it and that school is doing it, and you don't want to try to fall behind. And so you do that. You see that as a team aspect, and also individually do that. And so I think as coaches, what we can do is try not to put that undue pressure onto the players, that you hope that they feel comfortable with it. The only thing that I say is that if you show up to anything in the summer, just be excited to be there. And if you don't want to be there, that's okay. I think some coaches say that and don't mean it. And so the kids feel intimidated if they're not there. I really think that we truly don't put pressure on the kids. In fact, I had a text message from a kid a couple weeks ago that I asked to go to a tournament. He says, Coach, I just don't like playing basketball in the summer. Fine. 3-sport athlete. He lifts weights. He plays the other sports. He'll be there in November, which is fine. And I think maybe sometimes coaches would take that as, well, that kid is going to be punished now. He's dropped down the list. I guess that's just not my philosophy.
And the main thing is get out there and do something that it always doesn't have to be structured, but go out and get a pickup game going in the neighborhood. Don't be sitting around doing this all the time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, I've got an interesting story with that, too. I tell our kids all the time that that's some of the best basketball you're going to find. Go over to a kid's house, 5, 6 of you, 7 of you, play a 2-on-2 tournament, play a 1-on-1 tournament, get the Kool-Aid out, get the music out, do all that type of stuff. And also is to find games in different towns, on different blacktops, anywhere that you can play. The 2 stories I have with that is that I grew up in St. Cloud, and so I had a lot more opportunities because it's a bigger town and there's a lot of places you can just go and play. And you bike and you just play. Well, you find out real quickly what your strengths and weaknesses are when you're playing against guys that are quicker and more athletic and older than you. And that's how I learned a lot about basketball, is because, this move that works against kids my own age, who I'm bigger and stronger than, is not going to work against some guy who's a lot quicker than me. And so you have to be able to understand, well, I got to be strong with the ball, or I have to do this. And so that's how you learn. And I don't think our kids do that enough, because things have to be structured. The other story I have with that is that a few years ago I had open gym in the summer, and kids were up there. I'd opened up the gym, and there was about 12 of them there. And they were shooting around. It was about 15, 20 minutes in. And I said, well, why aren't you guys playing? They said, well, we don't know how to pick teams. Okay, you line up on the 3-point line. The first 5 guys that make it are on one team. The second 5 guys that make it are on the second team. Oh, Okay, but they have grown up in a culture, and it's not their fault, but they've grown up in a culture where things are structured, are organized, here's where you need to be, and I think the great teams, they're able to find ways to just play and let's just play and let's have fun. And that could be a stick baseball game. That could be a 4-on-4 football game. That could be golf. It doesn't matter. But I think one of the negative aspects of so much control in the summer from coaches is the fact that the kids don't know how to do things unless they're structured.
Mm-hmm. Well, our theme here today was why we play, why you coach. And I just talked to a coach not too many weeks ago here this summer, and he's a head basketball coach, and he says, I said, how's your team going to be? And he says, basketball skills, I'm not sure. We got a long way to go. But he says, I think this is the greatest group of guys I've ever coached, and he's really looking forward to it.
That's neat, and I think sometimes it could go the other way. And that was one of the messages at our conference, too, is that you've had coaches that we have this great team, we got all these great athletes, but they're jerks. And it's not very fun. But then you had other teams that maybe aren't as talented, and the kids are great, and they work hard. But either whatever team that you have, you really try to mold them together and to try to move them forward in a positive direction. But sometimes it's just a matter of the makeup of the kids. Sometimes you get some really tough kids and they don't really interact, and then sometimes you get some kids who they really like being around each other, and that that's when it really becomes fun.
Mm-hmm. And I think, too, we always have to keep things in perspective, too, right? I mean, don't overshoot things here and expect, I don't know what you're expecting, but keep it in perspective.
Yeah, and I think that's important to do as I think of the program philosophy for your players, for your parents, for your community, is to kind of understand that this is just a game, but also keep it realistic with our goals and our expectations. And that way, I think kids feel a part of it because they know that, hey, everyone's kind of realistic with where we're at here. We're not shooting for the moon, or we're not lowballing ourselves. That we have an opportunity to do something to try to reach where we want to reach, whatever that is. Maybe you're a 10-win team and your goal is to get to 12, or you're a 20-win team and your goal is to get to 22. So wherever you're at, a coach's job is always try to improve upon a little bit. But at the end of the day, the kids are what they are, and you're just going to try to improve them from a technical standpoint, but you can always try to improve them from a personal standpoint and from a learning development standpoint.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, thanks for joining us here.
Thank you very much.
All right, that's Melrose Boys basketball coach Ryan Dusha talking about why we play right here on Mid-Minnesota Sports.